Hello! Since we are nearing the end of 2025, Best Books of the Year lists are starting to come out, and I always really enjoy looking through these lists because I want to check up and see how up to date I am with my reading and how many of the books I've read from these lists. But also, there are often books that are mentioned that I've been meaning to get to, and this prompts me to get to them sooner rather than later. But also, they often mention books that I have never heard of before or come across, and that I might want to read before the end of the year. So recently, Publishers Weekly published their best books of the year in many different categories, and I'm gonna go through the 20 books they have listed on their fiction list because fiction is what I'm most interested in and what I most often read, but they also do a top 10. So I'm gonna start with that, and that is books in a whole range of different genres. So I'm gonna go through their brief summaries of all of these books, but give any extra thoughts or commentary I have about these books, if I've read them or not. But I would love to hear, have you read any of these books? Do they also count as some of your top books of the year? Are there any of these books that you are really interested in reading before either the end of the year or just sometime in the future? I would love to hear about that in the comments below. And if there are any of these books that if you might have read that you would recommend to me in particular. So first off, looking at their top 10 books, and the first novel on this list is Audition by Katie Kitamura, which was recently shortlisted for the Booker Prize, and they write, "This ambitious novel begins with an intriguing mystery. Who is the young man claiming to be the long-lost son of the narrator, an actor who knows she has never had a child? Halfway through, after the narrator adjusts to a difficult role in a play, the book turns on a surprising hinge that perfectly fastens together its form and subject." And yeah, that is such a great summary of this very tricksy novel, which I read this summer with my online book club, and we had such great discussions about it because I think every reader brings a different interpretation and meaning to this story because the story can be read in so many different ways, and it's the kind of book that you immediately want to go and discuss with other readers. And it was recommended to me by a member of our book club who said that she wanted to discuss it with us, and so we made it a book club choice. And yeah, there's just so much to say and so many different points of view about this book, and you can go through and see different supporting evidence to back up your own interpretation of it. And there are just surprising things in this book that I did not expect going into reading it. Reading that summary and knowing just like the overall description of the book, I thought I knew what I was going to get, but I did not know. And I heard from a number of people at the Booker Prize ceremony that thought that this book was going to win the prize because it's the most, I guess, innovative in its style, but David Soloi's book is also very innovative in its style. So yeah, I'd really, really recommend Audition. Now, the next book is The Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. Horror and revenge-driven thrills provide a vehicle for searing commentary on the history of violence against indigenous populations in this wildly ambitious and staggeringly accomplished novel about a Blackfeet warrior who becomes a vampire after he encounters a beast brought to his land by white settlers. And I keep hearing so many great things about this novel. I keep meaning to pick up a copy, so I'm gonna look out for it at a bookshop the next time I go there, and put it on my Christmas wish list if I don't manage to pick up a copy. The next book is a nonfiction title, Capitalism and Its Critics, A History from the Industrial Revolution to AI by John Cassidy. This enthralling intellectual saga traces the history of capitalism from the perspectives of its critics on both the right and left, finding fascinating commonalities across centuries and continents. What emerges is a vivid picture of capitalism as a visceral force within the lives of people from all walks of life, elegant and erudite, it's a totally unique view of the modern world. And that sounds really fascinating. I'm not often drawn just naturally to nonfiction titles, but I think this book, especially because it's one of their top 10, it's one that I would like to read, but probably on audio. I often find that I prefer nonfiction books on audio, just because it feels like I'm being taught something often in my reading, whereas with novels and fiction, I often prefer to read the physical copy because I just want to conjure in my imagination how the characters sound when they're speaking, and imagining the environment myself, rather than having that done that through the voice of the audiobook narrator, if that makes sense. So yeah, I would be interested in getting to this. Another nonfiction title on this list is Deep House, the gayest love story ever told, by Jeremy Atherton Lynn. Lynn's brilliant follow-up to Gay Bar braids together an account of his and his husband's late 90s love story with a look at the history of gay marriage. And this is the UK cover of this book. Some of the books have different UK covers from the US covers, so if I have copies of the books, I'll show them while discussing this, because it's fun to see the differences. The US cover is a bit more racy than the UK cover. It goes on to say that this gives a look at the history of gay marriage, combining steamy sex, thoughtful social critique, and dogged reporting into a dazzling narrative that's equal parts radical, tender, and timely. And I did read this author's previous book, Gay Bar, which I thought was excellent. Such a fascinating and really engaging and fun social history, but he also looks at lots of complex issues and ideas in his writing as well. So I've been meaning to get to this and want to read it before the end of the year. Next book, going back to fiction, translated fiction, is On the Calculation of Volume, Book 3 by Solvej Balle, translated from the Danish by Sophia Hersey-Smith and Jennifer Russell. Balle raises the stakes and explores new possibilities in her series about a woman trapped in a time loop, who now finds others who are also stuck reliving the same day. The third of 7 installments, this raises provocative philosophical questions about identity and how to best make use of one's time, and confirms the series is destined to become an enduring classic. And yes, I have read the first 2 books in this series. I'm now so eager to get to this third book in the series. I think I prefer the UK covers that have been coming out about this. And it is such an intriguing way of looking at how we live in the world and our relationship to time and our bodies and to other people and to the natural world around us. The second book definitely gets a lot into the natural world and the changing of the seasons. And I am hooked on this series, though I do question whether they need to be published in separate books like this. I mean, they are such a piece that they could all be published together, and I guess maybe it's a marketing strategy to, you can get more money out of publishing them all separately, but especially because they are relatively slim, it just seems like, yeah, they should all be coming out together. Although as they are being staggered in their publication this way, it does create a feeling of suspense of what is going to happen next, and book 2 ends on such a cliffhanger. I don't think these books could be read separately and independently. You sort of need to be in the series or not. Like reading the second book, I would have been quite adrift if I hadn't read the first book. But I think they are so interesting that it is worth investing your time and, well, maybe money, maybe get it out from the library. And I assume after all of the books come out, they're going to be published in a big omnibus all together. Next book is Searches, Selfhood in the Digital Age by Vauhini Vara, Vara's most inventive work yet is a soulful, perceptive take on humanity's relationship with technology, both collaborating with and critiquing artificial intelligence in essays that are wholly unique and moving. She draws attention to the gap between the richness of reality and technology's superficial approximation of it. And I think that sounds like such fascinating subject matter. It's another book that I would love to get on audiobook to read. Now, the next book is The Sisters by Jonas, Hassen, Khemiri. And this novel has the same cover in the US as in the UK. It's rare to find the narrator of a work of autofiction as invested in the lives of others as Khemiri's is. Jonas, a writer, unspools an intimate, decades-spanning saga of three Tunisian Swedish sisters speeding up time as he and the sisters age. This narrative device reflects what time feels like as life passes and makes the novel become more propulsive as it goes. And I've heard such great things about this novel from other readers, although not from all readers. Some readers are quite critical of it as well, but it makes me really intrigued to know what I'm going to make of it. But it sounds like a story that I will find really involving and engaging. So I keep meaning to read this book, which is why I have a copy of it, although it's quite long. So I just need to find time and block out some time to finally get to it. But yeah, I love the sound of this tale. It's another nonfiction book, Water, Mirror, Echo, Bruce Lee and the Making of Asian America by Chang. More than a biography of actor and martial artist Bruce Lee, this is an essential history of the Asian American experience. Journalist Chang pulls off the ambitious endeavor with nuance, flair, and heart. In sentences that pack a punch, he effortlessly puts a larger-than-life figure into the context of his time. This definitely sounds like interesting subject matter, though it's probably not a book that I will get to all that soon, but I would love to hear if you've read this book and would recommend it. There's another nonfiction book, When It All Burns, Fighting a Fire in a Transformed World by Jordan Thomas. An anthropologist and firefighter, Thomas delivers a rare up-close look at the perilous front lines of the climate crisis, recounting his stint with an elite wildland firefighting crew in California in 2021. He pairs his awe-inducing account with a captivating history of indigenous controlled burns and an in-depth look at how private companies take advantage of fire disasters to make a profit. This book sounds so relevant and important. I slightly worry that it might depress me quite a lot reading it, but yeah, it's a subject matter that definitely sounds like it's worth listening to, and that yeah, I would probably like to read it by listening to the audiobook. And finally, the 10th book in this group of their top 10 is Your Name Here by Helen DeWitt and Ilya Gridneff. In this vital metafictional narrative, DeWitt and Gridneff embark on a quixotic project to write a commercially viable book that will also disrupt the staid literary marketplace. The result is dizzying, yes, but it's held together by the author's razor-sharp wit, and it's poised to restore even the most jaded reader's faith in the fun and power of literature. This sounds so good, and I've not come across this before. I know Helen DeWitt is a very well-respected author, although shamefully I've never read anything by her before. But yeah, what a fascinating sounding story and project. And of course, I just love any books that are a celebration of literature. So I'm now going to go to their top 20. And the very first book is a book of translated fiction, Archipelago of the Sun by Yoko Tawada. And this is translated from the Japanese by Margaret Mitsutani. And in this novel, Tawada concludes her dystopian trilogy about a Japanese expat searching for her lost homeland in a world where Japan has literally vanished from maps with a stellar finale. Loyal readers and newcomers alike will savor this closer's mix of whimsical Wes Anderson-style charm and piercing insights into authoritarianism, xenophobia, and climate change. And this sounds like such a fascinating series. I've not read the other books in it yet, and even though they say that you don't necessarily need to have read the other books, you could start with this. I probably would like to start with the first and second books before getting to this final book in the series, but I've never read this author before, and I've always wanted to because, it sounds like she has such imaginative work. Atavists by Lydia Millette. This linked collection constitutes one of the best works of fiction about life after COVID-19. Millette writes with exhilarating freedom about people's anxieties and contradictions, as when her characters confront the tension between their left-leaning worldviews and their own self-interest. Not only are the stories revelatory, they're completely hilarious. I want to read this. I loved books of linked short stories, and this just sounds so great to me, and I've not come across it before. So I'm going to put it on my list now to get at some point if I'm in a bookstore or library or maybe as a Christmas present if people are looking for Christmas presents for me. Bog Queen by Anna North. What begins as a moody forensic murder mystery morphs into a brilliant millennia-spanning saga about a scientist who examines the well-preserved body of a woman found in a northern England bog. North intriguingly ties both women's stories together as they clash with friends and foes while pursuing their ambitions. And this sounds like a really fascinating story as well, which I don't think I've come across before. I've seen Anna North's name before, but I've not read anything by her. But I like it when fiction kind of bridges a gap between two different time periods and two different characters to find common themes and ideas between their stories. Counting Backwards by Binny Kishenbaum. Over the course of this compassionate and quick-witted narrative, an artist copes with her husband's decline from Lewy body dementia. With this novel and its marvelous predecessor, Rabbits for Food, about a woman's mental breakdown, Kirschenbaum establishes herself as one of the finest contemporary writers of illness. Another novel I've not come across before, and that I think sounds really interesting. Although quite often with these lists, because this is a US list, some of these books might not be out in the UK or might not just have got as much attention here in the UK. So I'm glad that this is tipping me off about some new US fiction, because I'm going to be taking a trip to the US soon. So I'm going to be wanting to hit the bookshops there and have a list of books that potentially to get along the way. The next book is Endling by Maria Reva. What's a writer to do when her novel in progress about snail conservation and mail-order brides in Ukraine is interrupted by the Russian invasion? For Maria Reva, the protagonist of this scintillating metafiction, the answer is to begin writing about the war. In the real Reva's hands, the solution feels at once liberating and reverent. And I was quite surprised at how moving and impactful I found this novel. I know some readers found it quite jarring as it goes between different sections and the story she's writing and the real author, but how her true experience and the experience of the war in Ukraine interrupts the narrative of this story necessarily in the construction of it, I think is so fascinating and it's so impactful in what she is doing in this book. So I found it such a great read, and I'll put a link below to my full review of it. But I also had the wonderful opportunity to interview Maria Reva about it, and we had such a fascinating discussion about it and the whole construction and story behind the creation of this book. I'd really, really recommend it. Flesh by David Solvej, this year's Booker Prize winner. And here is the UK cover. This is a rare instance when I prefer the US cover to this UK cover, just because I like how the apple on the cover and the two faces in that, and how that image of the apple core is kind of reflective of the content of the story and getting at the center of this man's life. So they write, Solvej delivers a lean and muscular novel about a man who leads a guilt-filled life after accidentally killing someone as a teen. It builds to a gut-wrenching finale which stays with the reader as much as the author's indelible portrait of a man who's simply trying to live. And yeah, that sums it up great. And as a portrait of a man's life, by just focusing on certain islands of experience, and then there are gaps in between those experiences, and often within those gaps, significant things are occurring in his life, and so they are kind of occurring off stage, but how we catch up with him throughout the course of this story, it builds up to such a triumphant portrait of a man in all of his complexities, and doesn't give any easy answers to his actions or motivations or why he is the way he is. But there's an undercurrent of emotion that comes up through this story and this book that I think is so impactful. And I know not every reader is agreed and agrees with that, and others didn't find this as effective. But for me, I think this is an incredible novel, and I was so glad that it won this year's Booker Prize. And also now the author signed it for me. I went to the Booker Prize readings, and so I now have my signed edition, which shall go up on my shelves here. Fox by Joyce Carol Oates. With her trademark deep moral clarity and eloquent prose, Oates transcends the trappings of dark academia and police procedurals to spin a story of a pedophile teacher and his untimely death. Along the way, she offers a fierce examination of the predator's enablers and the unraveling of his twisted self-justification. And this is such a triumphant novel that builds this portrait of this monster, showing him from the inside, but also his effects upon the community around him, his enablers, his victims, and the people who are trying to bring him down, and the complexity of dealing with someone's reputation who is a respected member of the community but turns out to be a monster. And the way she gets at this, I think, is so psychologically insightful, but also really insightful about our communities and how communities function together. But it's also a mystery. It builds up, and I was wondering how it was going to resolve, and it resolved in a really surprising way for me. And so there's so much about this book that I think is really fascinating. Of course, Joyce Carol Oates is my favorite author, and so I made a separate review about this book, but also had the wonderful experience of interviewing Oates again, and we had such a great long discussion about this novel. So I'll put a link to that below as well, and during which she shows me her shelf of books that she has written. It's obviously a very, very big shelf, and it is so fascinating that they mention dark academia in their brief summary of this book, because at the Booker Prize party, I had the wonderful experience of finally meeting in person David Ebershoff, who's a fantastic author, writer of The Danish Girl and other great books, but he is also an editor, Joyce Carol Oates' editor. And when they were discussing, amidst their discussions of this book, he mentioned how this is could be marketed as a dark academia book, and he said that Oates had never heard of dark academia before. I mean, even though she's online so much, on Twitter so much, but yeah, I had never come across this kind of genre, this modern genre in fiction now before. But yeah, I think this book could definitely be classified as that, but it is also so much more. So yeah. really highly recommend this novel, even though it deals with very dark subject matter. So yeah, the dark academia aspect of is very, very true. God and Sex by John Raymond. There's plenty of God and sex in Raymond's beautiful novel about a spiritually minded nature writer and his affair with a married woman. What ties it all together, though, is an affecting and complicated portrayal of the friendship between the writer and his lover's husband, which leads to one surprise after another. This sounds like an intriguing story, but the cover of this, it's so blank. It doesn't really tell me anything. It's quite a bold thing to have such a blank cover like this. And yeah, it's a story I wouldn't say I'm naturally drawn to. So if you have read this book and would recommend it, please let me know about that. Martha's Daughter by David Haynes. Haynes' gimlet-eyed collection amounts to a searing examination of the Black respectability politics shaping his characters' families and communities. No good deed goes unpunished in this volume, and whether the story's moments of confrontation and disillusion elicit circumspection or rage on the part of the protagonists, Haynes' writing is thoroughly cathartic. And yeah, that sounds really intriguing. I've not come across this before. And also, it's endorsed by Leila Lamy, who calls it an absolute triumph. And Leila Lamy's Dream Hotel, her novel from earlier this year, still sticks in my mind. Yeah, I think that's a really impactful book, and I trust her judgment. So yeah, I'd be keen to read this. Open Up Stories by Thomas Morris. One of the most undeservedly overlooked books of the year, this collection blends gritty realism and allegorical fantasy with profoundly affecting stories of men and boys and their yearning for acceptance, either in contemporary Wales or the depths of the ocean among a herd of horny seahorses. So this story collection, it's interesting. Sometimes there are wide gaps between publication dates in the UK and the US, because this collection came out here in the UK a couple of years ago, and I read it at the time, and it is such a beautiful collection. I'd read Thomas Morris's fiction before. He is such an impactful writer, very straightforward but beautifully written prose that are nonetheless really emotional and just I really love his fiction. So I'm so happy to see that it is getting an audience in the US, and hopefully this being on the list will push this book up and get more people to read it. Pick a Color. With this portrait of a nail salon, Thama Vonsa crafts a mischievous and resonant novel drawn from the frame's negative space, the immigrant workers' native language, in which they exchange body jokes and pass judgment on their unsuspecting English-speaking clients. It's a fascinating view into lives that remain invisible to others. And I think this sounds like such a fascinating novel, really hopefully very funny and engaging one as well. So yeah, I'd really like to read this. The Remembered Soldier by Anjet Danji, translated from the Dutch by David McKay. Danji unfurls a staggering modernist work of love, guilt, and the slippery nature of identity. It takes place in the years after World War I, when a woman recognizes an amnesiac veteran as her long-lost husband. The story grows increasingly complex as the veteran wonders if he should trust his wife's version of the past. And I've not heard of this book before, but yeah, I think it sounds really good. I wouldn't naturally be drawn to it with the cover with a soldier on it. It just feels a bit old-fashioned and like, oh, do I want to read another war story? But from the summary of it, I think that sounds really good. And also, it was published this past summer here in the UK, so it's a possible contender for next year's International Booker Prize. But yeah, I'd really like to read that. Sky Daddy by Kate Folk. Folk transcends her novel's bizarre conceit. A lowly San Francisco tech worker pursues her sexual attraction to airplanes by flying on them as much as possible, hoping to be forever united with one in a crash by shaping it into a universal story of modern love and exploitative labor. So from the description of this book, I don't know if I'd naturally be drawn to it. It just maybe sounds a bit too quirky and oddball, but I've heard from so many readers who have really enjoyed this book and endorsed it, and yeah, it makes me really want to read it. So that's another book that I definitely want to get a copy of next time I'm in a bookshop, or hopefully it's at my local library. So Far Gone by Jess Walter. A divided America provides the inspiration for Walter's exciting, redemptive, and tragic novel of men armed with guns and the desire to set things right. It opens with an isolated retiree's well-meaning but misguided quest to save his grandchildren from a Christian nationalist militia, and it builds to a moving depiction of a fractured family's reconciliation. That sounds really fascinating and good, although it sounds like quite a lot. I might need to emotionally brace myself for this story, but yeah, I'd be keen to read it, but yeah, it sounds quite dark. Softy by Megan Howell. Howell's debut collection blooms with harrowing beauty in spare and candid stories about Black women and girls' desire, turmoil, and misguided attempts at self-improvement. Howell explores her characters' poignant compromises and self-erasure. The imagery is unforgettable, as when a woman's use of anti-aging cream turns her into a little girl. That sounds so good. Yeah, and a writer I've not come across before. I mean, I guess because it's a debut collection of stories, but yeah, and I keep meaning to read more short stories, and yeah, I think this would be an excellent one. Twist by Colum McCann. McCann's novel of a journalist's adventures abroad, an underwater cable repair ship off West Africa, explores the lingering appeal of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness as the reporter compares the colonial trade routes depicted by Conrad to the cables that connect the modern world. It's a page-turner packed with ideas. That sounds really appealing, and I feel slightly ashamed. I've never read Colum McCann before. I've always meant to. It's just one of those writers that I don't know why I've not got to reading his books yet, but yeah, this sounds great, and probably a great one to start with. Universality by Natasha Brown. Brown takes on class tensions and the rise of populist grifters in this sly and ambitious satire. It begins with a magazine article about an illegal rave at a country estate and develops into a nuanced story of the fledgling writer's motivations and the famous controversial columnist who exploits her. And this novel has been getting so much praise. It's been prize nominated, was Booker long-listed, and but for me it wasn't entirely effective. I think the ideas and themes of it are really important and topical, but the way it went about it in the story, it just felt a bit too obvious to me. So yeah, this book didn't entirely work for me. Feel free to disagree with me. I know lots of people do, but yeah, and I'll be so fascinated to read whatever else Natasha Brown writes. I loved her debut novel Assembly, but yeah, this just wasn't so much for me. Vame by Jon Foss, translated from the Norwegian by Damien Searles. The Nobel winner offers a much more accessible but no less stunning story than the one found in his demanding septology. After a bachelor makes his annual voyage from his rural village to the city of Bergen, he has an unexpected encounter with his childhood sweetheart. From there, the magical novel grows increasingly surprising and poignant. And Jan Foss is an author that I keep meaning to read more of his books because I read the first book of Septology and thought it was so fascinating. And again, I don't know why. I've just not got to. I mean, his writing can be quite melancholy, and so I guess they're saying that this is a bit more accessible. And I have been to the city of Bergen before. It's a beautiful city. So yeah, I'd love to read a book set there. The The Wayfinder by Adam Johnson. With his quest narrative set in ancient Polynesia, Johnson raises profound questions about the nature of oral history and storytelling, and the ways in which a person's cultural mythology shapes who they are. The narrative follows a girl's mission to save her island's people from starvation, and it transports readers with its evocative detail and heart-stopping drama. This sounds great. I'd really like to read this. So this is going on my list as well. And the final book in their top 20 fiction books is The Wilderness by Angela Flournoy. Flournoy's empathetic follow-up to The Turner House follows four friends from their early 20s into middle age, holding together the free-ranging novel which delves into the housing crisis, campus politics, climate change, COVID-19, and much more. Are the women's lasting friendship and the author's astute depictions of their rich inner lives. This sounds really good, doesn't it? It's the problem with going through lists like this. I'm like, I want to read that. And start adding too many things to my list, probably much more than I'll be able to get to reading anytime soon. But it's great to hear more about these books and learn more about them, and just kind of put them on my radar to hopefully get to at some point. Really fascinating group. I've read some of them, but there is much more to get to. So I'd love to hear if you've read any of these books and would also recommend them, or if you're eager to get to any of them now, or if they've been on your list before and that you've been meaning to read. I would love to hear about that in the comments below. But thank you for following me as I go through this list and make my own personal list of reads I want to get to. And I hope you have a lovely day and are reading good things. And I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.